Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. RMPs have stakes in a combined $379 million worth of property in New Zealand. A Herald investigation has found that is an average of $3.16 million across each of our 120 members of parliament. And despite the rumours, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon doesn't top the list as the most lavish. Today on The Front Page, NZ Herald data journalist Chris Knox is with us to dive into the numbers and discuss why it matters. First off, Chris, what motivated you to investigate and compile this data on MPs' property ownership? And what challenges did you face when gathering this information?
Well, I guess from the motivation point of view, I think that it's an important thing to understand what MPs, how much property they have and how that may or may not impact their decision making. It's something that Parliament kind of recognises as being important by making MPs declare what they have, but they don't actually ask them to declare what it's worth. So we decided to kind of take it a step further and find out what the properties that they declared were worth, which is something the Herald had previously done in 2013. So it also sort of was like, well, it's been 12 years. Let's revisit it and see how things have changed.
So you knew where to look.
Yes, we knew where we were starting from the register.
Who are the top five and what do they own and how much is it worth?
So the total portfolio is worth about 380 million or 379 million. And Suze Redmayne who's the new National MP for Rangitikei. She is the top with about 24 million, most of which is a large farm with 18 million. Interestingly enough, she took over, kind of assumed office after Ian McKelvey retired, and he was the previous top. So it's obviously farms in that area are clearly worth quite a bit of money. He was worth a lot more, I think more like 60 million if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow. So Luxon is often rumoured to have the most significant property assets, but he came in second, right?
He did, yes. Certainly, he had the most significant residential property assets. So if you exclude farms, he would have come in first. But yeah, so he has a couple of houses in Auckland worth about 7 million each, and one rental property.
So who came in at 3, 4, and 5?
So third was another national farming MP, so Barbara Kuriga, who's the national MP for Taranaki King Country. She has about $14.5 million worth of property, or at least declared interest in that. And again, quite a bit of that's farming. Fourth was Carl Bates, who is the national MP for Wanganui. And then fifth on the list was the first non-national MP, so Parmjit Palmer, who's an ACT MP, has about 11 million worth of property in Auckland.
So some MPs have this complicated property asset interest kind of thing involving trusts. You've got company shareholdings and things like that. You just mentioned Old Maid and Wanganui, was it?
Yeah.
Why is trust ownership so prevalent among MPs?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that.
Is it just what rich people do?
I think that's part of it. I think that, and there's a bit of commentary around, because I was trying to work out so I think I found that there were 47 MPs that use trusts, which is over a third. And I was trying to work out what percentage of New Zealanders use trusts. And couldn't find kind of good numbers on that. There were some estimates from 2006 from IRD, I believe, and they were sort of about 10%. But I think it's reasonable to assume that, the MP usage is higher, but I think part of that is just that a lot of So have been in business for quite a long time before they became MPs. Certainly farmers make a lot of use of trusts. So I just think that, anyone with kind of substantial property holdings and also property holdings that kind of run across multiple family members, trusts seem to be. The other thing I think is that trusts I think there's been some commentary that trusts are sort of overused in New Zealand up until the rules tightened up after the Panama Papers came out a few years ago. So I think now there are costs. So the costs associated with trusts make it something that you have to have a real reason to do, whereas previously it was just kind of, why not?
Well, how transparent is the current disclosure regime? And do you think that gives the public a full picture of an MP's wealth?
I mean, I guess the disclosure regime is not intended to give a picture of their wealth, just the things they have interests in. I think it's reasonably transparent, but it assumes good behaviour by the MPs. So there's a very little enforcement there's no, like the registrar doesn't check that MPs have declared things correctly. It's kind of entirely up to them, and it's only when the media or another party kind of starts digging around that things kind of may get referred up to an inquiry. But it isn't like there's not a process in place where so the MPs are given guidance and then they make. I do think that though the guidance could be tightened up. Like I've noticed a lot, there's quite a bit of variation between different MPs' declarations. Like for example, the National MP for Kaikoura has declared in incredible detail all of his shareholdings, and then other people have seemed to follow a much more kind of sort of vibe-based approach. And some MPs are declaring very I have a rental property in this suburb, and then other MPs are just like residential property in Auckland. And you're like, well, so there's quite this sort of variation, and I think it would be good to have a bit more consistency in the process.
It has made up a big part of the election campaign so far. Your party has repeatedly insinuated that Labour is planning a capital gains tax. How many houses do you own?
I've been up front 7 houses.
There are 120 MPs in Parliament. Who owns the most houses?
I have no idea.
Is there any MP you can name who owns more houses than you?
I don't know, Jack.
Is there any MP you can name that owns more houses than you?
I don't know. I also don't. I don't have a clue who owns what. Yep.
Why is it important for MPs to declare property and I guess other financial interests? What are the parliamentary rules around that kind of transparency? Basically, it's so they don't go and make decisions. I've got a house in Kaikoura, for instance, and there's a big development happening. I have the power to do something about it, right?
Yeah, basically it's to provide transparency about the kind of parliamentary process. And I think that often I suspect that often there's more of an assumption of kind of wrongdoing. Like if there's no information, then it's very easy to kind of start speculating about what might be behind decisions. Whereas if the information's out there, then you can just kind of have a look and be like, okay, that they had these properties and it probably didn't impact it, or maybe it did. Or it is interesting though that the local government rules are much stricter in terms of once you've declared an interest in at least in some of the local government meetings that I've seen. If you have a conflict of interest, then you actually recuse yourself from that meeting. Whereas at a parliamentary level, it's more just they're declared, and then it doesn't actually impact your decision-making process.
Right. Should there be better safeguards in place to make sure that MPs don't make those policy decisions in relation to what they own or what kind of interests they might have, do you think?
I think it would get pretty tricky.
Right. Because one person can say, I've got shares in Air New Zealand, and then one person can say, my cousin's sister works for New Zealand or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you would land up with kind of half of the MPs having to recuse themselves from most, so many sort of the decisions that are made at a national level can have such a big impact, and like particularly when you look at the, so there was about $3 million of property roughly per MP, but if you look at it per party, then the Acton National MPs are sitting in more like 4.5 million each. And so that's getting up to be quite a lot of kind of interest in property. And so then, do you need to get every National and ACT MP to recuse themselves from any decision that might impact property prices, which is kind of, all of the decisions, or not quite, but, certainly there's a lot of rules that Parliament can consider, which may or may not impact property prices.
Yeah, well, your article mentions restoring mortgage interest deductibility for landlords as a significant policy change, obviously. How did you estimate potential financial impacts for MPs and what did that reveal?
So I was able to look at a number of MPs who declared that they had rental properties. And then you can see from records how much they paid for those properties and how long ago it was. And then you have to start making big assumptions, which is why we didn't name any MPs for this, because the assumptions, obviously I have no idea what an individual MP's loan structure is. But if you kind of generally, there's a requirement at the moment, although I think there may be some moves afoot to change it. But at the moment, you need a 30% deposit for a rental property or an investment property. And so if we just assume that those properties were bought with a loan equal to 70% of the value of the property, and that the loan was set for a 30-year term, and that the interest rate on average was 6%, which is kind of roughly what average interest rates over time are, then you can go on to something like the sorted mortgage calculator and see what amount of interest is being paid after a certain number of years. And so one MP I looked at, after 17 years of paying that mortgage, they'd be looking at about $50,000 a year in interest payments. And so and you can also assume that all MPs are any extra income they get is going to be in the 39% tax bracket, because it's probably over 180,000. And so then they're able to deduct that. So if they've got extra income, then they can deduct 50,000 from their income. And in the 39% tax bracket, that's going to be about 20,000 back.
Tell me, Chris, why does this all matter, do you think?
I think it's just important to understand what our MPs own and what they're doing, and how those decisions how any decisions they make could impact their personal situations. For example, the MPs are sitting on almost 200 million worth of family homes, and there's constant discussions around things like capital gains tax, wealth tax, which isn't to say, I'm not putting forward whether any of those things are the right policy, but I think that you have to look at an MP's holdings to really understand whether they are considering those things, kind of from looking at a future, like what is the tax structure of New Zealand, how is it going to look going forward, that sort of thing. Are they actually able to consider things from kind of the nation's point of view, or are they too drawn into their own portfolios?
And a lot of trust goes with that as well. And like you said, we trust people and especially MPs to just do the right thing, hey?
Yes, we do. And so, and I think that being able to see what they have. The other thing too is it's not, being rich is not necessarily a bad thing, and so I think it's also good to see what, it gives us a message of where our MPs have come from, and what they've done, and you can see their involvement in farming and that sort of thing as well as part of this process.
When you were digging into the numbers and seeing how much each person owns and everything, I mean, was there anyone, apart from the top five, say, was there any other people that stuck out to you that you thought, interesting? Not
particularly. I mean, there was obviously Carl Bates popped out as there was something interesting going on there.
Because his family ended up being one of the largest landlords in that area, hey?
Yes, that certainly looks like they're one of the largest private landlords in his own electorate, which is an interesting situation to be in. And one I think that ought to be more transparent. I think actually one of the things that I was surprised by was that compared to the last time the Herald did it, the kind of the headline numbers aren't actually that large. So for example, Ian McKelvey was worth on the order of about 60 million in 2013, and John Key's properties were worth far more than the Prime Minister's properties now. And so it's almost like this 12 years later, Parliament actually in some ways has less property holdings than they did previously. And there wasn't anyone whose property holdings kind of would reach into that sort of mega rich. Certainly there's some quite wealthy people there. But there are people in New Zealand who own considerably more than anyone in Parliament.
Thanks for joining us, Chris.
No worries.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.